WisconsinEye's Campaign 2024 programming is sponsored by Wisconsin Counties Association, Nicolet National Bank, Wisconsin Hospital Association, Operating Engineers Local 139, the Wisconsin Realtors Association, the Wisconsin Laborers District Council, and North Central State's Regional Council of Carpenters. To support programs like this, please consider a tax-deductible donation at wiseye.org/donate or by texting WisEye to 44321.
Kyle Kilbourn of Rhinelander is the Democratic candidate for the 7th Congressional District. The election is November 5th. Kyle Kilbourn, welcome to WisconsinEye.
Thanks for having me on here.
All right, thank you for participating in our candidate interviews. I'll start by asking, why are you running for this office and how would you describe your campaign's key message?
Yeah, I grew up in a small town, about 200 people. My parents had a 1-acre farm with some cows and chickens, and my dad was a construction worker, my mom was a waitress. So we worked really hard. We weren't rich, but we were able to have the American dream. And I'm seeing more and more in rural areas that that's not possible, and that's why I'm running, is to ensure that our youth in the rural areas have that opportunity.
What do you consider to be the most pressing challenge before the country, and what specific action are you planning to take if you're elected to Congress?
Yeah, what I'm hearing across the district, I've been visiting the 26 counties that make up the district. I'm hearing the cost of living, the cost of gas, groceries, and prescription drugs. And so for us, the campaign is focused on making sure that government is working for the people and capping prescription drug costs, making sure the cost of our energy is lower, and making sure that we're working for the people.
This next question is kind of related to that. How do you see the state of the economy, and is there any other legislation or policy that you would propose to incentivize economic growth, specifically in Wisconsin and in your district?
Yeah. What we're saying is, the middle class is struggling. The economy is great for large corporations, and what we need is to focus on bringing back our small businesses. The small businesses are the lifeblood of rural Wisconsin. And so for me, focusing on how do we ensure we have more startups in the district. Going across the district, I've seen empty storefronts, and that's disheartening because often that's the lifeblood of our community. And so for me, it's how do we sort of simplify deductions, but also increase them to ensure that our small business have a way to start.
Inflation rates have stabilized, yet they are still above pre-pandemic rates. What, if any, is the role of Congress in keeping the costs of goods and services low, and what are your other thoughts on that?
Yeah. I think Congress has a role in making sure that corporations aren't doing price gouging and ensuring that, we're holding corporations accountable, and so, of course, making sure that there's competition in the marketplace.
Are there any parts of government spending that should be reduced?
The challenge with government spending is there's a lot of loopholes. And so there's, a couple industries that get a lot of corporate subsidies, and that hurts the bottom line. So energy, transportation, agriculture get a lot of corporate subsidies, and that hurts middle-class Americans because that raises taxes. And so if we really want to dig into government waste, we have to do that in a meaningful way, which hasn't been done in decades. We have to have good faith negotiation. The challenge is there's only 19% of the budget is discretionary. There's a lot. It's going to be very hard to squeeze something out of that 19%. And so we have to make sure that our tax code is fair and balanced for fair working-class Americans.
It has become increasingly expensive to raise a family. What policies do you support that making raising a family more affordable? For instance, do you support a child tax credit, and in what form? Or are there other policies that you see that could reduce the cost of childcare?
Yeah, we have to focus on the biggest drivers of cost for our families: healthcare, housing, and childcare. I think when we look at childcare specifically, child tax credits are one way, but we also have to incentivize childcare startups. I mean, we have childcare deserts in the district, and so we have to make sure that funding is going to incentivize childcare businesses.
The cost of housing, as you mentioned, is another issue for Wisconsinites. What federal policies or legislation would you support that might lower the cost of housing either for renters or home buyers?
Yeah, as we look across the district, as we look across the nation, we're short of 3 to 7 million homes in the district, of where we should have, in the nation. And so, policy has to be, how do we sort of get more housing on the ground? I think for me is, investment firms are buying up housing, raising the price. As a designer, I'm excited about this because we can design 3 million new homes for people using new technologies and new techniques that will fit homes for people. One of the things that I think we need to take a look at is making sure that we have simplifying our home building regulations, but also being competitive in the marketplace and making sure that we have competition in the housing marketplace.
Vice President Harris talks about a $25,000 subsidy for first-time home buyers. Is that something you would support?
I'd have to see the legislation to be specific, but I think there is something there that how do we make sure that all families can build wealth, and a home is often that one place where families build wealth, and that seems to be a reasonable legislation.
Social Security faces potential long-term financing shortfalls. What reforms to Social Security do you support to ensure its future solvency?
Yeah, one of the easiest one is scrap the cap. So right now, if you make over $168,000, you stop paying into Social Security. Just think of all the millionaires and billionaires that aren't paying in. We need to make sure that it's fair for all families that pay into Social Security.
Should the retirement age be changed?
It should not re-change. For example, my parents worked as hard as they could for as long as they could, but became physically disabled. So our bodies wear out over time, and especially in our district where we have a lot of manufacturing, we have a lot of construction jobs, people that work in forests and farms, they can't afford to work until they're 70, 80 years old.
Medical systems are facing numerous headwinds in the form of inflation, workforce development, and issues around Medicare and Medicaid reimbursement, resulting in fewer services and even the closure of a hospital system in western Wisconsin. What would you do to preserve access to care and prevent future closures in our state?
Yeah, this is one of the top issues I hear across the district is the closing of our rural healthcare system and the distances that people have to travel. My doctor's, an hour away, just the primary care doctor. And so, I realize how important this is to our district. We have to have access to healthcare, but it also has to be affordable. I think there's lots of solutions to strengthen our rural communities' access to this. Part of it is how we fund rural healthcare. We sort of have the same formula as if you have a rural hospital versus an urban hospital. Well, those rural hospitals have to stay open no matter what. And so how the formula is made is something that Congress can work on.
Local communities in Wisconsin are faced with a growing number of issues. For example, issues related to water quality pre-PFAS or a sudden influx of refugees like Wisconsin saw in 2021. How do you plan to collaborate with local governments to ensure they have the necessary resources to address local issues? Yeah,
this is important. As a district as big as ours with 26 counties, we need to be on the ground and sort of collaborating with local government. One of the things I think when I staff my office is having a strong field presence. So we know what the local communities are doing. My opponent, for example, comes out with legislation that would affect Bayfield County without even asking them. And so for me, it's about how are we on the ground making sure that we are listening to the community as we develop legislation.
Are tax cuts or tax increases, you talked a little bit about this, tax cuts or tax increases a focus of your campaign? And specifically, do you support extending and making permanent the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017?
Well, tax cuts are great if they work for the middle class. The tax cuts of 2017 was mainly directed at millionaires and billionaires. And so, if you haven't felt the tax cuts of 2017, would you really miss them? Then they probably weren't designed for you. And so I think tax cuts are great when they actually are benefiting the middle class.
So Vice President Harris talking about a middle class tax cut for people making $400,000 or less. Is that the sort of,
exactly.
Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, $400,000 would be a great income. I can't imagine, making more than that. So definitely.
Should there be federal abortion policy passed by Congress, or should it be left to the states to decide?
I trust women to make healthcare decisions. My opponent has come out with extreme measures that would limit abortion access, even IVF. For me, I think, we should trust women to make, and their families to make healthcare decisions, not the federal government.
What should Congress do?
Congress should codify Roe v. Wade.
What's your position on climate change, and what congressional actions do you support that balance environmental and economic concerns with economic growth and job creation?
Climate change is a growing threat, but it's also an opportunity. Unfortunately, my opponent thinks that's a hoax, And so we are not investing in renewable energies for this district. Look, we should be taking advantage of it in this district. We have the love of the outdoors. We love being outdoors. We should be able to capitalize on that, ensure that the opportunities for good paying union jobs and investing in our communities is here.
So more renewable energy
Exactly.
production and opportunities in this part of the
Exactly.
state. Should the U.S. continue to provide military support to Ukraine, and for how long and in what form?
Yeah. So I just want to be clear that I'm on the side of people without power. And so whether it's people of Gaza or the people of Israel, I'm not going to support an extremist government. It's about being on the side of people. Even in Israel, they're protesting an extremist government. And so for us, we need to strengthen and support our democracies across the world, but we also have to hold them to a high standard.
So Ukraine, do they need more military support from the United States?
I think as a allied democracy, we should be supporting democracy across the world.
How should the U.S. be balancing support for Israel with concerns over civilian casualties in Gaza in the Israel-Hamas war?
Yeah, I mean, we have the power of the purse, as we're funding quite a bit of it. So as we look at that, like how do we sort of say, these actions are what we want to see in the region, and ensure funding is going towards those actions.
So more pressure on Israel.
Exactly.
Are you troubled by the record-breaking amounts of out-of-state money being solicited by Wisconsin campaign operatives to influence our local elections?
Absolutely. I've made a pledge not to accept corporate PAC money. My opponent has received $88,000 from food and retail PACs to support his campaign to make sure that he continues to do their bidding. He's received PAC money from 8 sugar producers to ensure he passed the bill that made sure sugar is in chocolate milk. He's taken $33,000 in insurance PAC money to, while our insurance prices have skyrocketed across the district. So it is absolutely essential we get money out of politics.
A lot of money is being spent going to broadcast to stream negative attack ads, many of which those ads walk a fine line in terms of accuracy versus exaggeration. At a time when the nation is so divided, how would you respond to a Wisconsin voter who might ask you to stop using negative ads?
Yeah, I think there's a right way to do ads. Attacking an opponent's record and what he's doing is the right way. So does he take money? How does he vote? Is an appropriate way to do it. I'm not going to attack him on his character and sort of fluffy vibes. I'm going to attack him on what is he doing, and if he's not actually taking our constituents' needs into account, he should be held accountable for that.
Moving on to education. The number of Wisconsin school districts going to referendum asking local taxpayers for funding is increasing. Is there a need to increase federal spending on K-12 public education?
Look, schools are the center of our communities. When I'm going down around the district and seeing closed schools, that affects our communities. If a school closes down, our community shuts down. And so we can think of the federal government as an investment vehicle. Where do we as a nation want to invest? I think schools are a great investment for the nation because we can invest in our children. We can invest in our future. And then that is sort of a vote of confidence in our future.
So more federal money
Yes.
for K-12 education. Do you support federal student loan forgiveness?
Yes. We have decided as a country that we need qualified professionals across multiple occupations. We have loan forgiveness for teachers, public workers, medical professionals. We have to sort of prioritize where do we need students to choose careers that will benefit the nation. And we've had these programs for many, many years to say we deserve qualified medical professionals and we want them to go into these industries. And so, yes.
Student loan forgiveness across the board or in certain
I think we need to
professions?
prioritize. I think we've done a okay job of doing that. We can do more. So, we've had a limited number of programs, and so making sure that we sort of expand that and making sure, all right, here's the medical or the professions we need in the next 10 years. Are we having the right number of students in those professions, and making sure that those forgiveness programs are dedicated towards those.
What would you focus on in an effort to fix what many feel is a broken immigration system?
Yeah, we need a comprehensive solution. It's not a one, it hasn't been fixed for decades, and so unfortunately the challenges are large, and a lot of them. We need a strong border, absolutely. We need to strengthen the immigration system and the court system. Unfortunately, my opponent, when a bill was brought up, a bipartisan bill, he came out against it before it even got to the House. And so knowing that we need someone, instead of playing political games, actually wants to develop common sense solutions to this issue. We need funding for border agents, we need funding for new technology, and we need funding for the court system to deal with this.
What about undocumented immigrants? Do you support any form of deportation or changes to a pathway to citizenship? What should that look like?
Yeah. We need more funding for the court system to decide if they should be in the country or not. Like now it takes way too long. We need, as we look at how it affects our district, we're a very rural community. We have farms that depend on migrant labor, and so making sure that we balance the needs of our industries that are in the district with the need to secure our border.
We are down to our last two questions. What's the biggest difference between you and your opponent?
I think I will be a representative that listens, that works hard, and delivers real results. I'm not going to be one that plays party politics. I was a designer that worked on complex problems in the corporate environment. I worked in academia to actually get things done, and that will be my solution.
Final question. Given the steep national partisan divide, what is one issue you think has the potential to be resolved that would bring the parties together?
I think housing is one of those issues. It is a nonpartisan issue. It affects everyone in the country. It's often the highest, cost to live, and so I think Congress can come together to solve this solution.
Well, thank you, Kyle Kilbourn of Rhinelander, the Democratic candidate for the 7th Congressional District. The election is November 5th. Kyle Kilbourn, thank you for talking with WisconsinEye.
Thanks for having me.
This programming is brought to you by our generous sponsors. Thank you for watching.